Hello, hello. Very happy to be here. Glad to meet you all. Um, this is my second time in Tartu. The first one was 20 years ago, so believe me, it does not look the same. I'm a senior product designer at Printify. And Printify is a dropshipping platform connecting online merchants with stores on Shopify, Etsy, things like that, with producers, printers, who can actually make, package, and ship the things that they want to sell. So that's kind of what we do. We have a pretty big office in Riga, which is also where I'm from, and we have a smaller office here in Tallinn. So if you're from Tallinn, you might have heard of us or seen us before. Now, I'm a kid of the 90s, and I actually grew up without the internet, and where I learned about the internet was from a book. So it was a guidebook to the internet. It wasn't very thick either, so you could put a lot of, or not so much content really in there. But as a kid, I was quite fascinated with all the things you can do on internet. You can search for things, you can email people, you can buy and sell things. So immediately I was quite hooked at all the possibilities that the internet could offer. And not long after that moment, I started to experiment and create my first websites as well. Now, it wasn't anything fancy. I was just a kid. I didn't know what the coding was or how to code, but somehow I made something work and I published it as well. I don't remember what was the content on those websites anymore, but I do remember using these hit counters at the bottom of the page that would just tell you how many visitors your page has gotten. And I remember going back there, refreshing those pages and being amazed and captivated by each single visit. That really meant a lot. And around that same time is when I think I started my first design experience as well. I had to somehow make these websites look a certain way. And I remember using these wonderfully designed Microsoft clip art illustrations that I would either put on my websites or print them on a piece of paper, bring them to school, and impress my classmates. Now let's fast forward a couple of decades, and things are not quite the same anymore. As designers, we're often tasked to work with many challenging problems. And when we're starting to work on something new, whether it's a new role that we're endeavoring in, maybe we're starting something from scratch on our own, or maybe we have a new job, we have to make some decisions along the way. And those decisions are not always easy. Should we stick to the things that we know and we have tried and they work? Should we go down that path? Or should we somehow go and explore the things that are not so well known, become little explorers ourselves, and try to answer these questions on the go? So like I said, designers nowadays, we're working with challenging problems, and this is what I think makes our jobs very interesting. But the path to the solution is not always so straightforward. In the middle, there's something that happens, and at the end of that, we're coming out with some sort of working solution. But that messiness in the middle, that's something that I would like to focus on this talk here today. So what should we do? Should we embrace this messiness? Should we try to avoid it? And so I'll tell you a little story of how we have managed to untangle some of these threads and create our own path in Printify. So let's dive in. So one of the first things that we're doing as designers is we're looking for things to work on, for problems to solve. So finding opportunities is probably going to be the first step that we might do. And user interviews is a handy method that comes along with that. We like to talk to users, understand what they're feeling, what they would like to have, what they would not like to have, and that's definitely a very solid foundation of our work. But sometimes our calendars might look like this. I know this is also the case for me sometimes. So it takes time. Interview planning takes time, conducting interviews takes time, analyzing the insights and then debriefing the team. It can be quite time consuming. And if you're on a tight schedule, we need to get a little bit more creative. So what we try to do is look at social media. This might be something that sounds like procrastination, but it can be work. We have fairly active user base on Facebook, and they're quite actively sharing their thoughts, their feedback, and we read that. At least we try to. So we go on Facebook and we look for these comments. We've made some product decisions based on these comments too, And it's a great way for us to understand what's the overall sentiment based on the likes or the comments that are being posted. So it's a nice way to understand the severity of some certain themes. But there's a little bit of a problem with that. And the problem is that we can't reliably go on Facebook and extract insights every single time. We might get distracted with other things that Facebook has to offer, or maybe the users aren't just commenting enough. So we need to do something else. We need to create some more structure out of that. So what we try to do is also ask for feedback in a form. Now, you've probably seen this before. You've gone on a website, there's a little pop-up that shows up, asks you a question, how would you rate your experience from 1 to 5? And then there's a little comment box at the end that you can fill in. And so it's a more efficient way for us to aggregate that feedback, filter it by themes, get the positive comments or look at the negative ones only. So it's a little bit more efficient way to do that. And I've also added some of these tools that we are using if you're interested. And additional benefit here is that users can be much more honest because they don't really have that filter. They're not talking to an interviewer like me, one-on-one. They're just typing some comments on the internet, seemingly anonymously. So there's a lot more directness, a lot more honesty that goes through that, and it can help us to really understand what the user really is trying to say. And there's one more thing that I would like to add here, and that's watch parties. And watch parties probably sound a little bit too fun than it actually is, but let me tell you, it's still fun. There's a party in the name. And basically, those are meetings that happen every other week where we, as a cross-functional team, designers, developers, PMs, get together and we watch how users are using our product. We have tools that record everything that user does, like the clicks, the scrolls, where the user goes and navigates. We can replay that and look at that from the user's perspective. So it can be quite helpful if we are trying to see how users are adopting a feature that we have just launched, so we can check how they're using it. Or maybe we saw a comment previously in a forum that we could not really understand. Why did the user leave that comment? What was the thinking behind it? So we can find that user by looking up the user ID, typing it in this tool, and we can replay the whole session and see exactly that moment when that comment was written. So it can be quite helpful to debug some things as well. And even if we don't have any concrete agenda, we can just watch some random sessions, kick back on a Friday, and it's a way to spread empathy and user-centered thinking towards other teammates who might not be involved in user research or user-centered activities on a daily basis. So it's quite helpful in that sense as well. So far, so good. So we've collected a bunch of data from different inputs, and this allows us to triangulate, which means we can put different points of data together to try to understand the bigger picture. So we have the why, which is the interviews. Then we have the what, which is the form feedback data, maybe some numbers. Then we have the how, which is how are users using our products, so we can watch that. And by combining all these insights together, we can have a really good, broad picture, high-level understanding of what's going on, which gives us more confidence to proceed to the next step, which is to understand these insights. Now, it can be quite overwhelming to think what to do with all of that data. Some users might be saying, well, I need this new feature, can you please do that? Other users might be saying, well, I don't like that, do something else. And some users will be just entirely confused by the whole thing. So what should we do with all this mess? What should we do with this data? So we need to find a way to categorize it somehow. And so we've created a very simple pyramid, which starts from the bottom layer, which is the pains. Those are the things that are most severely affecting the users. If you do not solve these problems, we will be blocking access to the value that we're promising to the user. So this is the most severe category that we want to pay attention first. Then there are wants, things that are still valuable to the user, but we can somehow do them a little bit later. And there are nice to haves, which are, well, nice to have. These are the things, if we ignore them, nothing bad will happen. We can pick them up later on. It's going to probably add a bit of a delight to the user. But then a next problem emerges. How do we know which insight belongs into which category? If we just approach this ourselves and try to do this, it may seem like subjective thinking, and it doesn't quite feel right. So what's working for us is looking between the lines, let's say. So it's not so much how the users or what the users are saying, but how they're saying it. We've had some interviews where the camera was off for the user, and it was really challenging to tell whether this user was being sarcastic or not. It's just the way that this user speaks, perhaps. So looking at faces and facial expressions really helps us to understand what point the user is trying to make. Also, the tone of voice. Where does the user put the emphasis in a sentence, and how does this sentence is being articulated? And also, we can pay attention to gestures, if there are any. So these things combined will help us understand if user is referring to a pain point or something that's nice to have. So far, so good. We've collected a bunch of data. We've put it all together in a pyramid. But then it seems like we're on a next question, which is, what should we do next? There are a bunch of questions, actually. And so one option might be, we can just do the easiest thing to do, which is probably going to be the cheapest, the fastest thing we can build. We can deliver value to the user quicker, so this might be a sensible thing. We can also do what the management is asking us for, because we surely want to be aligned with the higher-up vision of the company. We want to support the business goals, so that's another valid option. Or we could just say, we'll ignore everything else. We'll be 100% user-centered. We're going to look at that pyramid of user needs and just do that. And it might seem that these are mutually exclusive choices, but they're actually not. We can actually do all of them, and at the same time even. So let me tell you of a framework that's working well for us in this case, and it's called Opportunity Solution Tree. Now, this might not be a new or a novel concept, but it's really good to reiterate and see how this can be applied in our case. So let me talk you through it. So the first step is desired outcome. This is where we start off. So this is something that we, as a team or as a company, we want to achieve. It's going to be some kind of change in user behavior that we can measure, and it's going to impact our business results. So that's step one. Step number two is solution to that. That's the user need or pain or desire, which is the pyramid that we have identified before, which is going to relate to that outcome that we want to achieve. And following that is going to be the solution to that opportunity. This is just going to be a bunch of ideas that we can ideate together with a team or solo. Does not really matter. And lastly, we will have quick ways to validate these ideas. And in this step, in the validation, we can check for multiple facets. We can check for usability. We can check for desirability. We can check for feasibility, and we can check for viability. So both user-facing questions that we can ask and internally-facing stakeholder questions that we can ask. And let me show you a quick example how this might look in practice. So let's imagine we have a e-commerce business and we sell stuff online. Our desired outcome might be to improve customer loyalty, and we will have some confidence that improving customer satisfaction is going to drive that result. So this is going to be a way we will measure that. And we have identified two opportunities. One is, let's say users cannot remember their credit card information online when they're shopping. And the second one is they want to see more products on our site. And again, for one of these problems, let's say their credit card information, which they cannot remember, we can come up with multiple solutions. So one of them might be offering different payment methods, such as Apple Pay or PayPal. Another solution might be to save these credit cards online, so they might have their wallets, their accounts made, or they might have a different way of paying. So let's say paying on delivery, which might be with cash, so no credit cards involved whatsoever. And again, let's take the first solution, which is Apple Pay and PayPal, and try to find ways to validate this solution. So we can look at different ways to do that. We will have usability aspect in there. We can ask users, well, can they actually use this solution? Do they understand how it works? Then we can check for desirability. Do they actually want to use these providers? And then we can check for viability. Is this a profitable solution for our business? Is this going to hurt our margins? Can we afford to implement it in a way that's sustainable? So again, this is where we can check for multiple aspects in one solution. And it doesn't really matter which solution works in the end, as long as it drives the desired outcome. That's the only thing that we want to see. So it's very much outcome-driven, not so much output-driven. And so this is a screenshot from our solution trees in Printify. And as you can see, there are quite a few of them. So that's it's just the way it goes. There's always things we discover, more opportunities, more problems, more solutions we can brainstorm. So we will add them to these trees. It's a living and breathing and growing thing. And one more thing that we've done here is we have color-coded these areas. So the areas in green are the ones that have been validated. We have tested them, these solutions work. So we can say this is something that we're going to focus on. The areas in red are the ones that have not passed the validation. So these solutions we will not work on. So this is an explicit way for us to map these things on the board, and we can quickly see high-level view and explain other stakeholders what are we working on and why. I'll take a moment here back to step back and address the outcomes again a little bit, because it might be the case that you don't really have a concrete idea in your mind. What do you want to have as an outcome? Or maybe you have too many outcomes on your plate and you don't want to stretch yourself in too many directions at once. So how can you decide on outcomes? And a way that this is working for us is working with OKRs, objectives and key results. So we can just take the objective from the OKRs and set that as our desired outcome. And because objectives need to be measured through key results, this is also going to be a way we'll measure it. So this is the first step pretty much taken care of already. If you do not work with OKRs, you have different framework, that's fine too. The bottom line here is just to make sure to be aligned with the management, to make sure you're facilitating the higher business strategy and you're not doing something separate that does not support that. So then, we're approaching the last cycle of our process, which is delivery, which is where we deliver things. And here I would like to reiterate a little bit, because we've heard about many concepts like continuous discovery, continuous design, and continuous delivery. But for us, it's really more about continuous learning. Now, learning is one of the core values of a company as well. And so learning happens in all of these stages. But it's especially prominent at this last stage, because as designers, we might be tempted just to kick back and watch things being built and sort of put ourselves in this relaxing mindset. And usually it starts like this. We have a blank state. We have a project that's either documented somewhere, and it seems like it's all taken care of. We'll need to start working on it at some point. And as we are working on it, we discover a bunch of questions, a bunch of messiness comes out of it. Maybe we're not able to recruit the right users. Maybe the insights that we're getting are not really delivering much value for us. Maybe the solutions that we're testing, they're not really validated, so we can't proceed with them. So what should we do next? So a bunch of questions, bunch of messiness. And then out of that, some kind of structure emerges. Some kind of processes are created, which facilitate a more smoother process, or we become smarter, ourselves more efficient, we learn along the way. And so the pendulum swings to the other side, and this is like a natural cycle of the process that we have. And we also have some rituals set in place that really facilitate this learning. So here I would like to start with the A/B testing. We have a pretty good experimentation culture in the team, so everything that we release and work on is a small experiment. And so just by looking at the A/B test results, we can see whether this is driving the metric in a favorable direction or the opposite. And then we can try to find ways, why is that? What made it work or did not work? Along with the A/B tests, like I mentioned earlier, we have these watch parties that allow us to replay user sessions and watch and observe how users are interacting with some specific features that we're just built. Now, there's a concept of an ice cream test. So you might be going to a grocery store, and you might see somebody offering you to sample a bunch of ice cream flavors. And you might try some, and the person will ask you which one was your favorite, and you will probably point to one. But then as you're actually going through the shop and buying an ice cream for yourself to take home, you're very likely to pick an entirely different ice cream. And so this is the same principle here. Users might be saying certain things during tests and discovery, but when things go live, and as we observe the users interacting with our products, things sometimes look a little bit different. So it's a very humbling moment for us to learn. We also have stakeholder reviews. Now, these are people from different departments, different disciplines that sometimes come in, provide fresh perspective on the work that we do, and it's always good to hear because it's a bunch of fresh eyes that are always valuable. And last but not the least, we have failure stories. These are meetings where we as designers get together sometimes and to save space for us to openly share what has not worked for us, where have we failed, what can we do next time to avoid this, and what can we learn from that? So again, different ways we can facilitate this whole learning process. Now, initially, I asked some questions about the process. How should we deal with this messiness that naturally comes along the way? Should we try to avoid it? Should we try to embrace it? It might be tempting to come up with big and ambitious goals and step in and try to achieve them at all costs. But for us, it's a slightly different way. It is quite okay to learn as you go. And sometimes we fail, sometimes we share these failings with others, and we improve next time. So experimenting with confidence is a term that comes with a bit of a caveat. It's not so much about going in with confidence, but trusting the process that everything will work out eventually in the end. You'll become smarter, you'll become better. So we approach these things with vulnerability, curiosity, and learning mindsets. So this is what experimenting with confidence means to me. So I'll leave you with that. I hope it was useful. If you have any questions, I think we have some time now. If you don't, feel free to grab me after the talks. I'll be around. I'll be happy to chat. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions from the audience? There is one question there. The mic doesn't work for some reason. Yeah, it works.
Thank you. Super awesome talk. And with these type of frameworks or processes, it's always this question about two things for me. One is time frame, like how long these experiments usually last, and the other is kind of scalability. How many of these can be done in a one go or in a specific time frame?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. Regarding the time frame, we plan our work in quarters, so every 4 months. So this is the time frame when we'll aim to have something designed and up and running. And usually it takes about 2 weeks to get some meaningful data from these experiments to understand if they're working or not. So yeah, this would be about roughly sketching out the timeframes and the scalability of how many can we tackle. I would like to kind of go back to this solution tree where we have a bunch of solutions drafted and there's different assumptions we can check. We will want to prioritize these solutions as well because we can't go at all of them at the same time. So sometimes we use different methods. We might be using a RICE framework, which is reach, impact, cost, and effort. This is something we do collaboratively with the team. So we'll give each idea a score and each aspect a score. So the highest score wins. Or maybe we'll do something simpler like impact versus effort axis, which is something we will do together with the team as well. And we'll try to prioritize the highest impact ideas. So we'll start with those and see how it goes. If the validation fails, we'll move on to the next ones. Thank you.
There's one question there.
Hello, my name is Diana. Thank you so much for your speech. It was very interesting, and me personally, I learned a lot. And I would like to ask you, So I am the only designer in my team. We have a pretty small company, and I wonder, do I have any advice on how I can bring such beautiful design processes into teams' work? Because for now, I kind of like don't feel confident to play with confidence because nobody else doing that. But do you have any advice on how we could start that? How maybe, yeah, just anything. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you for the question. It definitely can seem like an uphill battle, even in bigger companies. It's not very streamlined for me either. So I have to persuade other people quite often to facilitate these processes or jump into these processes. A couple of examples, like the solution tree, which was this big framework with a bunch of boxes and arrows, can be quite daunting to get started, but that's something you can do as a designer on your own, have your first version created, and then you can show it to your PM, and maybe next time, or if you're recurring meetings with your PM, that can be your basis of your conversation. So let's look at some initiatives that we have started, or what are we working on, what will we work next, and kind of be that, have that framework in the background. So that's a natural way to kind of let other people lean in there. When it comes to other rituals like meetings, this might be a little bit tricky if you're only one designer. Of course, you might have failure story with yourself, but I guess there's a good book I can recommend, which is the UX Team of One, which exactly explores this problem. What should you do as a solo designer? I think it might be a handy resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Yep, back there. Mic is coming.
So this might be less of a design question, more of a product management question, but you probably have thoughts on it anyway. Killing features, and how do you get confidence to actually pull the plug?
How do we kill the features, right? Was that the...
How do you get confidence to kill the features?
To kill the features. So there's two ways. So one is through testing. Of course, we'll try to do an A/B test and see if the metric moves one way or the other. And to be honest, we kill quite a lot of features. That's a data-informed decision because when we're trying to do something, we're trying to find a metric, a measure, a way we can improve it. So maybe there's going to be some conversion that we'll try to lift or something like that. And if it doesn't help to move that metric, we'll kill that feature. If it's something existing that is already built, or maybe it's a legacy feature, it might be a bit more challenging because we are not really actively collecting data on that specific step. So there we can just do something different. We can interview users. We can try to ascertain what's their perception of that specific feature. If we have something in mind, we can check for adoption. And we can experiment with removing that feature as well. So if we have some idea that this might be something that's bloating up the product and not really helping us move forward, what will happen if we remove it? If nothing happens, then I guess that's the answer, that we can get rid of that feature. So we can experiment in the other direction as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kasper.
Thank you.